In this chapter, we're going to see how you can present the music from your MIDI recordings to the musicians who are going to have to play it. If we take this example and look at, for example, the Albion Brass High section or the Orchestral Essentials Legato Horns track, we can go into the score editor that is included with almost every DAW these days. So if we open our Legato Horns track, we can see the notes laid out in this simple score. Now, of course, in theory, we could play to this, but I don't think I would present it to a horn player as it is now. If we look in our key editor, the issue we have is that the notes are not quantized, and the score editor does not necessarily acknowledge that those notes relate to a certain timing or position. There are a few options, and the most obvious one would be to quantize the tracks. In this way, the start of each note will be placed on an exact division. One thing to bear in mind here, though, is that you also need the note length to be correct. So, you will also have to make sure that note length is quantized. Of course, you also have the possibility to export these MIDI tracks as MIDI files, and then to import them into a professional scoring software such as Sibelius or Finale. You do have the possibility to edit these notes in the score editor within your DAW, but what you have to be aware of here is that you are editing your performance as well. If you then were to listen to your music, this would also be edited. Of course, you could work on a copy of your tracks to avoid this issue. But if you intend presenting a full score to a set of musicians, you would certainly be better off using a serious scoring software package. Most of the current DAW packages will offer various options to aid with scoring, but this is not necessarily their main area of excellence. Having said this, there are a couple of issues involved even when using a professional scoring package such as Sibelius. The first thing is that obviously the timing will always be an issue even in those packages, so you will have to correct your music anyway. Another issue is that if you do prepare your arrangement by exporting the individual MIDI tracks from Cubase and importing them into Sibelius or Finale, you will not hear the piece of music as you intended it, due to the fact that your scoring software will not be set up to work with your instruments. So let's look at a practical method of how to create a score. We've opened the legato string track. Now obviously in a professional setup, you would be able to work with two monitors and have, for example, your scoring software on one monitor and your DAW open in the other monitor. But obviously here we can only show you one screen. So we will have both programs open and we'll try and combine them on one screen. As hinted at, I will be using Sibelius to create a score. So we'll open the program and then we will create a new project. We have to choose some options now. We'll use the piano manuscript paper. Then we will keep the layout as is. Then we choose our time signature and count in length. Then we choose our key, which in this example is D minor. And then we give our score a title, and we will call this one Trailer Epic. Having done all of this, we are presented with a panorama view of our score, and we can change this to a standard layout. I'll make it somewhat smaller so that we can see it on the screen along with our Cubase Arrange window. So now we can see our notes in the track editor, and the advantage here is that we see the note numbers, and we can simply count and see where they should be positioned. Now you can of course insert the notes using your mouse, and in Sibelius we choose the correct notes here on the keypad. This again is a technique that requires practice, but it is very accurate. And with a little practice, you can end up creating the score in a relatively short amount of time. Of course, we have another method, which is to actually play the notes in once again. So to show this, I'll simply record the first section directly into Sibelius. Any errors can easily be corrected using the mouse, obviously. Then you can simply go through each entire track and record every section. If you want to record a polyphonic section, such as our Albion legato strings here, one method, which I find logical, is to record the top line first. In this case, it would be violin 1. And after having recorded it into Sibelius, I erase the notes from my key editor here, and then I move down to violin 2. And once again, when I have recorded violin 2, I erase that and move down to the viola, and so on. Logically, when I reach the final instrument, in this case that would be the contrabass, my key editor should be empty, and then I know I have copied everything into my score. Now this is a pretty time-intensive activity, but if your playing is up to scratch, in the end you are certain that your score will be correct. And also, there are no easy solutions to this issue. This is only relevant to situations where you need to deliver a score to a set of musicians. In most cases, you will probably be recording the strings for your own productions, or not creating an entire orchestral piece to be reproduced by an orchestra. One thing you definitely don't need this to do is to register your compositions. The main reason you would be doing this would be to replace your virtual strings with real string instruments. Another example is that you might just want to have your lead violin played by a violinist, and in that case you could simply create a score for the first violin. Especially in the world of classical musicians, they require a score to play with. So in reality, you would only use this if you were to have a full orchestra reproducing your arrangement, and even in that situation, many people would choose to employ an orchestrator, who would take your MIDI files and create a full and fully professional score from them. So the reality is that even if your DAW has scoring abilities, the idea that you simply select a track, open it in the score editor, and print it out for a musician to play is somewhat flawed. If we look at experts in the field of combining virtual orchestras with real orchestras, such as Hans Zimmer, where budget is less of an issue, then his basic MIDI orchestration will ultimately be handed over to an orchestrator, who will create the score for the real orchestra that will be combined with or replace his virtual orchestra.